Welcome to True Echo, where we share stories that echo deep truths of resilience, hidden strength, and powerful comebacks. Today's story follows a young black woman, a hotel housekeeper, who dared to speak in her mother tongue, and in doing so, changed the course of her life forever. This isn't just a tale of luck. It's about legacy, power, and the quiet revolution of being seen. Stay with us because this is one story you won't forget. My name is Jasmine Brooks. I used to clean other people's dreams off marble floors. Every morning started the same: the piercing shriek of the alarm clock at 5 a.m., the cracked bathroom mirror fogging up with cold water because the hot tap hadn't worked in years, and my silver housekeeping uniform laid out on the lone chair beside my mattress. There was nothing glamorous about my life in the Bronx, and even less hope in the eyes that stared back at me in that mirror. But every day before slipping out into the cold dawn, I'd whisper the same words in Spanish: "No me rindo." I won't give up. That was my grandmother's phrase. It stuck with me even when everything else felt like it was falling apart. No one at the Belgrave Manhattan Hotel knew I once graduated top of my linguistics program at NYU. They didn't know about the full ride I turned down to care for my dying mother. They didn't know about the Fulbright I packed away with my last hope. All they saw was a girl with braided hair, scuffed sneakers, and a mop bucket. And that was just how the system liked it. The Belgrave wasn't just a hotel. It was a kingdom where billionaires whispered in suites you weren't allowed to even glance into. I was assigned to clean floors 35 through 40, VIP and executive levels. No one spoke to me unless they were pointing out something I missed. I was the shadow, the ghost, the silent one. Donna Pute, my supervisor, made sure I never forgot that. "Jasmine, I see one speck of dust on that baseboard again, and you'll be scrubbing with a toothbrush," she snapped once. Her lipstick always bled into the lines around her mouth, like even her smile couldn't hold itself together. Still, I endured. Because after every shift, I rode the queue line to the Brooklyn Heights Library, found my usual seat behind computer number 7, and studied medical Spanish, legal interpretation, international dialects, anything to keep the dream alive. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared me for what happened on that cold Tuesday afternoon. I was sitting in the corner of the basement break room, eating cold red bean rice and scrolling through emails on my cracked phone. That's when I saw it. "Felicidades, Jasmine. You passed at the professional level." It was from Dr. Mateo Sanchez, my former professor. I gasped, then called him, speaking in rapid-fire Spanish, my words tripping over each other in joy and disbelief. "De verdad? Pase? No puede ser, Dios mío?" And I didn't notice the man standing at the door. I didn't even hear the door open. I didn't see him until it was too late. When I finally turned around, my phone still in my hand, I nearly dropped it. Standing in the break room doorway, an area strictly avoided by upper management, was Grayson Walker. Yes, that Grayson Walker. The reclusive billionaire owner of Walker Holdings. The man who built Belgrave from nothing. The man who, according to rumor, could fire a manager with a glance and had once replaced an entire floor staff because a royal guest complained about a hair on their towel. He wasn't wearing a suit. Just a gray shirt with sleeves rolled up and no tie, but there was no mistaking him. His presence hit like a thunderclap in a silent cathedral. "I didn't mean to interrupt," he said, his voice deep and slow like a cello. "You were speaking Spanish, weren't you?" I froze. My hands trembled, and for a moment I couldn't find my English. "Yes, sir," I finally managed. I was speaking with my former professor. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean." He didn't cut me off, but he didn't smile either. He stepped forward, eyes cool and analytical. "What's your name?" "Jasmine. Jasmine Brooks." He gave the faintest nod. "Thank you. Enjoy your lunch." And then just like that he turned and left. Not another word. No reprimand. No explanation. I sat back down, but my legs were still shaking. The room was quiet. The other housekeepers stared at me like I'd just touched a god. And maybe I had. I tried to go back to work like nothing had happened, but the damage was done. Word spread fast. By the end of my shift, Donna was waiting outside the locker room. "Well, look at you," she hissed. "Chatting with royalty now, are we? Maybe next time he'll ask you to scrub his shoes while you talk about the weather in Madrid." I didn't reply. I didn't have to. For the first time I looked her in the eye. Not with defiance. Just calm. That shook her more than any comeback could. That night I didn't go to the library. I went home and sat on my mattress, staring at the peeling ceiling and wondering if I had just changed the trajectory of my life, or destroyed it. The next morning my shift started the same way. But just before 11 a.m., I received a message from Marcus Hill, the shift manager. "Brooks, HR wants to see you. Now. My heart nearly stopped. Had I broken some rule? Did Grayson complain? I took the back elevator to the 5th floor, the administrative level, and walked down the silent hallway toward the office of Valerie Green, Director of Human Resources. The walls were sleek, the air cold and sharp like a courtroom. She looked up as I entered. Platinum blonde hair. Red lipstick. Ice in her smile. Have a seat, Jasmine. I sat down, stiff as a statue. Mr. Walker has personally requested your immediate transfer, she said. I blinked. Transfer? She leaned forward slightly. You are being reassigned as International Relations Assistant. A new position created just this morning. You'll be assisting with multilingual communications for our global guests. You start tomorrow. My throat dried. Is this for real? Valerie actually smiled. Mr. Walker does not act on impulse. He believes you've been underutilized. She slid a folder toward me. Inside was a new badge. A new title. A new salary, 3 times what I was earning. I almost burst into tears right then and there. I stood up and walked out of that office in a daze. The same hallway where I once scrubbed scuff marks from marble now seemed like a runway. People stared. No one spoke. On the 40th floor, I ran into Donna near the executive pantry. She stopped cold. Oh, look who it is. The language queen. I bet you've forgotten the smell of bleach already. This time I didn't look away. I didn't respond. I just stared at her. Calm. Silent. Like the past had already been folded and stored away. And then came the invitation. After lunch, I was summoned to the top floor. The glass room. Grayson Walker's office. And nothing would ever be the same again. The executive elevator glided up like a silent promise, every floor a farewell to the life I had known. I clutched the cream-colored folder they'd handed me, my new ID, my assignment, my uniform specifications, and tried not to think about how the world had tilted under my feet in less than 24 hours. When the doors opened to the 50th floor, I stepped into silence. It wasn't the cold kind I'd grown used to. It was the kind that holds power, the kind where every sound is softened by confidence and money. The glass walls overlooked Central Park. Walnut-paneled corridors stretched like museum halls. No clutter. No shouting. Only hushed voices and velvet footsteps. A receptionist, tall, sharp, and perfectly groomed, handed me a room keycard and pointed down the hall. Miss Brooks. Office 43B. He's expecting you. I walked slowly. The click of my new low-heeled shoes echoed behind me. My tailored navy blazer fit like it had been sewn from ambition itself, the ivory blouse crisp against my skin. I didn't feel like a housekeeper. But I didn't feel like myself either. At the end of the hallway, a set of double-glass doors stood slightly ajar. I took a deep breath and stepped inside. Grayson Walker stood near the window, looking out over the city like a man inspecting his kingdom. He didn't turn when I entered. Not at first. But then he spoke. You're here. Good. Sit. There was no secretary. No barrier between us. Just a low walnut table, 2 chairs, and a porcelain teapot already steaming. He poured the tea himself. I won't beat around the bush, he said. I created that position for you. Not as a favor. I did it because I need you. I blinked. Me? You think I didn't notice? His eyes locked on mine, not unkind but unrelenting. The way you spoke Spanish yesterday, it wasn't just fluent. It was alive. You don't just speak. You connect. That's something you can't teach. I swallowed hard. But I'm not trained in diplomacy. That's not what I need, he interrupted. I need someone who understands people. Someone who can read a room before the damage is done. He pushed a folder toward me. Inside were briefing documents for a negotiation that afternoon, a $280 million international expansion deal with investors from Spain. I want you at the table, he said. Not as a translator. As someone who knows when to speak and when to listen. My hands trembled. You sure about this? I asked, barely above a whisper. Grayson leaned back, his expression unreadable. I used to scrub hotel toilets for $3.15 an hour. Don't talk to me about who's qualified. That afternoon, I found myself walking into the glass-walled meeting room on the 49th floor, where every detail was calculated for intimidation. Italian leather chairs, a mahogany table longer than most studio apartments, and walls that doubled as one-way mirrors. Grayson entered with the confidence of a man who had been in that room 1,000 times. I followed, heart pounding. The investors were already seated. 6 men in tailored suits, their expressions sharp and unreadable. The leader, Senor Carlos Martin, stood and extended a hand. Bienvenidos a Belgrave, Manhattan, I said, bowing slightly. Estamos verdaderamente honrados de tenerlos aquí. Their eyes flickered. Surprise. Then slowly nods. We sat. The first 20 minutes were tense, standard posturing. Financials. Market reach. Projected ROI. And then Senor Carlos made a joke. We once had a partner in New York, he said, smiling thinly. They spoke in money. What about you? Everyone chuckled. Lightly. But there was an edge. I leaned forward, meeting his gaze. We speak with action. But if needed, we also know how to listen with the heart. Silence. Then laughter. Real, belly-deep laughter from Senor Carlos. Me gusta esta chica, he said. I like this girl. The deal lasted 2 hours. I translated. I smoothed. I redirected. I caught the moment when one clause was nearly misunderstood, something about data sharing protocols, and rewrote it in real time, avoiding a massive rift. By the end, Senor Carlos stood, shook Grayson's hand and said, I'm signing because of her. I stood frozen, trying not to cry. When the doors closed, Grayson turned to me. You just saved a $280 million contract. I shook my head. I didn't do anything special. Yes, you did, he said quietly. You reminded them we're human. And in this world, that's rare. That night he didn't go home. Neither did I. Because when he turned to me in that empty hallway and said, there's a place I want to show you, I followed. And on that rooftop, under the quiet stars, I realized something even more terrifying than failure. Someone finally believed in me. The rooftop was nothing like I expected. No chrome. No luxury. No intimidating signs of wealth. Instead, it was a quiet garden in the sky, stone benches nestled between lavender bushes, olive trees twisting gently in the breeze, and lanterns swaying above a cobblestone path. You wouldn't think it belonged to the man behind a $12 billion empire. But Grayson simply said, this is where I come when I want to remember who I am. We sat on a wooden bench near the edge, the Manhattan skyline stretching out before us like a painting. He poured 2 cups of red wine into simple paper cups. No crystal. No servers. No titles. Just us. He didn't speak at first. Neither did I. But the silence was comfortable. Eventually I asked, why me? Why take that risk? He didn't look at me as he answered. Because I was once the one nobody saw. I cleaned toilets. Carried trays. People walked past me like I was part of the wallpaper. But I remember the moment someone looked at me, not because I was a threat or a mistake, but because they saw something I didn't even see in myself. He turned, eyes locking onto mine. That's what I saw in you. Not pity. Not charity. Just recognition. I didn't know what to say. The words stuck somewhere behind the lump in my throat. So I told him something I hadn't said aloud in years. My mom died in that apartment in the Bronx. She used to say, you were born to break the ceilings I never had the chance to touch. I thought she was just trying to make me feel better. But now, Grayson nodded. She was giving you permission. We talked long into the night. Not about contracts. Not about hotels. About loss. Childhood. The broken systems that try to decide who gets to matter. He told me about his father, a hotel maintenance worker who died at 52 from exhaustion. He used to steal the tiny soaps from the rooms. Told me, you deserve to use what they use. I hated it then. I get it now. At one point I looked at him, really looked. He wasn't just the man from Forbes. He was a survivor. A builder. A scarred man who had carved a place in the world by sheer will, and was now quietly offering me a piece of it. And then something changed. He looked at me not as a boss, not as a savior, but as a man. A man who saw a woman not just for what she'd endured, but for who she had become despite it. Jasmine, he said, voice low, I'm not sure when it started. But I don't want to imagine this place without you in it. I froze. Not because of what he said, but because of what I felt. Fear. Hope. And a deep ache I had buried years ago. I've fought for every inch of my life, I whispered. If this ever gets out, they won't believe I earned any of it. They'll say I slept my way here. He didn't flinch. You have the right to say no, he said. If you walk away, everything stays the same. Your job. Your title. Your future. But if you stay, his voice trailed off, letting the silence finish the sentence. I looked out over the city, the mist gathering around the skyline like a dream forming. My heart beat loud in my chest. And then I said the only thing I could. I'm not going anywhere. We didn't kiss. We didn't touch. We just sat in the lavender-scented quiet, hands folded in our laps, knowing that something sacred had begun. Something we didn't need to define. The next morning, I walked through the hotel lobby like a new person. Heads turned. Some looked impressed. Others looked threatened. But I kept walking. On the executive floor, I saw them. Donna Pute and Lawrence Fielding, the company's global COO, standing near the coffee bar. They both paused as I passed. Donna's smirk returned. "Faster than I thought," she whispered. Lawrence replied without turning his head. "I don't oppose progress. But if it threatens the structure, I have to act." That was the moment I knew, they weren't just watching. They were plotting. But I didn't flinch. Because I remembered what Grayson told me just a few hours earlier. As long as I'm alive, no one is allowed to doubt you. And that was when I realized something even more powerful than their fear. I had become something the system couldn't erase. Not because of Grayson. Because of me. The silence that used to protect me had now turned into a spotlight. Every time I stepped into a room, people glanced up. Some nodded with forced politeness. Others avoided my gaze entirely. But there was one thing they all had in common: they didn't expect me to last. I could feel it in the way meetings were rescheduled without telling me. In the memos I stopped receiving. In the looks passed between executives when I entered the room, only to fall silent when I spoke. But I didn't back down. Every morning I came in early, reviewed documents, made suggestions Grayson actually used. I sat through investor briefings, handled Spanish negotiations, and built rapport with foreign diplomats who had never taken our company seriously, until now. But the higher I rose, the colder it got. 3 days after Madrid confirmed the Belgrave expansion deal, I received a notice. "Please report to Room 16C, Senior Coordination Team, 10 a.m. I already knew what it was. Not a meeting. A trial. Inside the room I found Camille Rodas, the senior HR liaison, and Lawrence Fielding's right hand. Her tight smile and carefully arranged files told me everything. "We've received concerns," she began, "about appointments that have bypassed the traditional 3-tier approval process." She didn't say my name. She didn't have to. "We're also reviewing any personal connections that may have influenced recent promotions." Translation? Are you sleeping with the CEO? I sat straight. "Come. If you're referring to my appointment, I'm happy to walk you through every qualification, achievement, and credential I've submitted. Would you like me to start with the Spanish delegation I saved or the German partners I brought on board last week?" Camille didn't blink. "This is a standard audit, Miss Brooks." "Standard my ass." But I smiled. "Then I trust it'll be conducted fairly." That afternoon I returned to my office to find my desk drawers slightly open. Nothing missing. Just disturbed. The photo of my mother, normally pinned straight, was crooked. Touch. A message. "We're watching you." That night I didn't cry. I didn't run. I went back to the Bronx. Sat on the old porch of the apartment I could barely afford 2 years ago. I stared at the spot where my mother used to sit, watching sunsets from a broken lawn chair. And I whispered, "They're coming for me, Mom. But I won't bend." An hour later my doorbell rang. It was Grayson. No driver. No coat. Just soaked from the rain and looking at me like he already knew. "You didn't say anything," he murmured. I didn't need to. He didn't speak again. He just stepped inside, sat beside me and took my hand. We didn't talk about Camille. Or Lawrence. Or HR. We talked about trust. "You don't have to fight this alone," he said. "But if you choose to, I'll still be behind you." I stared out at the streetlights flickering in the distance. I've lived a life where no one believed I would rise. I can't stop now. And I didn't. The very next morning, the rumors exploded into something more calculated. An anonymous article began circulating across small business outlets. Promotion or favoritism? The controversy behind Jasmine Brooks' meteoric rise at Walker Holdings. There were no sources. No facts. Just implications. A single photo. Me and Grayson at the Madrid conference standing too close. I was furious. But I didn't hide. "I'll respond," I told the communications team. Grayson's eyes darkened. "Are you sure?" I nodded. "If I let them define my story, they'll write it in a language I don't recognize." And so, I did something no one expected. I stepped onto the main stage of the Belgrave's annual leadership assembly, the same stage I once mopped before breakfast. I wore a dark purple suit. My natural curls tied back. No jewelry. No flash. Just words. I didn't talk about numbers. Or deals. I talked about being unseen. I scrubbed floors you've all walked over. I folded the towels you used after signing 7-figure contracts. And I heard the whispers. I still do. But here's what you didn't see: I never stopped learning. I never stopped growing. and I never once asked to be lifted. I climbed. Silence. Then a slow, rising applause. Not from Grayson. Not from the loyalists. From the staff. The interns. The ones who recognized their reflection in my voice. And for the first time I realized, they weren't clapping for a promotion. They were clapping for possibility. That same week, the company announced a global expansion plan co-developed by me. Belgrade, Madrid had been the first success. Now came Singapore. Then Tokyo. The press stopped calling me a token. They started calling me the strategy whisperer. But inside the Belgrade offices, something colder was brewing. Lawrence Fielding gathered his private circle. His voice was quiet, deadly. I want everything on her. Her background. Her past. Even her dead mother if that's what it takes. Because men like Lawrence don't lose. And he wasn't about to let a former hotel cleaner become the face of a new future he couldn't control. While the world praised the rise of Jasmine Brooks, inside the glass walls of Walker Holdings, knives were being sharpened in silence. Lawrence Fielding had built his career on gatekeeping. And I had just kicked open a door he thought would stay shut forever. A week before our launch in Singapore, Camille Rodas resurfaced. She hadn't disappeared, not really. She had simply gone quiet, like a snake beneath a floorboard. And now she was back with one mission. Destroy my credibility. At exactly 7:42 a.m. on a Thursday, an anonymous file was sent to 15 European media outlets, 2 corporate watchdog blogs, and the inbox of every regional director at Walker Holdings. The subject line read, Urgent. Conflict of interest, Jasmine Brooks appointment under scrutiny. Inside was a fabricated internal memo, complete with a forged HR stamp and fake signatures, suggesting that my promotion bypassed formal protocol due to a personal relationship with the CEO. It didn't matter that the evidence was fake. It didn't matter that I had earned every inch of my place. All that mattered was the question it planted. Did she sleep her way to the top? Grayson's office called an emergency meeting within the hour. I sat at the long conference table as legal advisors, PR execs, and communications directors debated whether to deny, delay, or deflect. I raised my hand. I'll speak. Grayson looked at me, brows furrowed. Jasmine, you don't have to. No, I said louder. I want to. He leaned back slowly and nodded. That afternoon, I stood in front of over 100 staff members in the hotel's grand hall, plus 24 journalists who had flown in for the Singapore announcement. Cameras pointed at me like loaded weapons. A Belgian reporter stood up and fired the question everyone was too polite to ask. Miss Brooks, were you appointed because of a relationship with Mr. Walker? The room froze. Grayson started to stand. I raised a hand and stopped him. And I spoke. This question isn't new, I said, voice steady. I've heard it in different forms for years. But the problem isn't the question. It's what the question implies. I've closed international deals. Led strategic talks. Rebuilt broken partnerships. But some people still believe that when a black woman rises, it must be because she slept her way there. The cameras clicked once, twice, then silence. I will not apologize for being chosen. I will not shrink to make others more comfortable with my presence. And if you still doubt me, I invite you to review every deal, document, and strategy memo I've authored since my promotion. I paused, then added, because I have nothing to hide, except, maybe, how hard I've had to fight to be seen. The crowd stood. Not in slow politeness. In a storm of applause. The following week, the truth began to unravel. A third-party investigation traced the forged documents back to a burner account registered under Camille Rodas's assistant. Within 48 hours, Camille was placed on administrative leave and later terminated. Grayson never gloated. I never retaliated. But the system knew, the old guard had lost its grip. At the next executive summit, something extraordinary happened. Grayson announced his decision to step down from direct leadership of Walker Holdings. The company would now be governed by a collective executive board, with me appointed as Director of Global Strategy and Equity Initiatives. Not just to sign deals, but to redesign the ladder that so many like me had been kept from climbing. Lawrence Fielding? He didn't even show up to the announcement. I knew he was watching though. Watching as the very structure he controlled shifted under his feet. Months later, I visited a Belgrade location in Morocco. A young receptionist, barely 20, handed me a coffee with trembling hands. "You're Jasmine Brooks," she whispered. I smiled. "Yes. You're the reason I applied," she said. "My manager told me girls like me don't get promoted. But then I saw your video. You didn't break the glass ceiling, you brought a ladder. That moment stayed with me longer than any title or headline. Because that was the point. Not just to rise, but to reach back. Back in New York, I returned one afternoon to my old Bronx neighborhood. The apartment had new tenants now, but the corner store owner still recognized me. "You left a letter with the landlord," he said, handing me a yellowed envelope. Inside was the note I'd written the day I moved out. One line stood out. "If someone reads this and thinks they'll never be heard, know that I once thought the same." I folded the note and looked across the street, where a new community garden had been planted. Darlene's Walk, the sign read. Named after my mother. The place she once dreamed of, now real. That night, Grayson and I sat on the rooftop again. The same lavender bushes. The same soft lights. He looked older now. A little more tired. A little more free. "Is this the peak?" he asked, his voice low. I shook my head. "No. This is just where the next story begins." The sky over Manhattan was a deep indigo the night before the Singapore flight. Clouds drifted like whispers across the skyline, and the rooftop garden, now referred to quietly by staff as Jasmine's Refuge, swayed with lavender and possibility. I sat beside Grayson, not as a protege, not as an employee, but as a partner in vision. "It still scares me sometimes," I admitted quietly. He didn't ask what. That people only see the polished version. That they think I was lucky. Grayson chuckled softly, the kind of sound that didn't come from a CEO, but from a man who had lived through fire and found meaning in the ashes. "Let them think it was luck," he said. "It's easier for them to sleep at night if they don't understand how much you bled." I smiled, the kind that came from surviving storms. "Then I hope they never know." The next morning, I boarded the flight to Singapore not as a translator, not as a seat filler, but as Director of Global Strategy and Equity Initiatives. A position that didn't even exist a year ago. One I had built brick by brick, word by word. The launch of the Belgrave-Singapore expansion was more than an economic milestone. It was the first initiative built entirely around the empathy strategy model, a system I had developed to train overlooked talent, nurture multicultural fluency, and root business in human understanding, not just capital gain. The press arrived in droves. The headlines called me the new face of global hospitality. But back in the boardrooms of New York, not everyone was celebrating. Lawrence Fielding may have been publicly silent, but the damage he'd tried to do had left scars. He had retreated, yes, but not surrendered. And his final blow had been carefully planted before his quiet departure. An anonymous file was discovered during an internal audit. It contained a confidential list of risk-profiled hires within Walker Holdings, candidates from non-traditional backgrounds flagged as morale risks. At the top of that list? Me. And below me? Over 140 employees, mostly women, mostly people of color, many of whom I had personally mentored or recruited into the reform program. It was a silent blacklist. A map of sabotage. I didn't react with outrage. Not publicly. Instead, I called a meeting, not of executives but of every single person on that list. We gathered in the atrium of the Belgrave Singapore during soft evening hours. No podium. No suits. Just voices. One by one they told their stories. Of being overlooked. Of being told to wait their turn. Of being quietly pushed out while being publicly praised. And when it was my turn, I stood without notes. "I was never meant to stand where I do," I said. "But I'm here. And I'm not going anywhere. And neither are any of you." That night, we drafted a new policy, the Open Door Mandate, a permanent clause in Walker Holdings' leadership handbook requiring transparent, equitable consideration for every internal promotion with third-party auditing. The blacklist? It was shredded. Publicly. In the atrium. In front of everyone. And with that, the old ghosts lost their last grip. 3 months later, Grayson and I stood together once again. Not at a hotel, not in a boardroom, but on the steps of a small public library in Brooklyn Heights. The same library where I had once studied on a broken computer after 10-hour shifts. We were opening the first Jasmine Brooks Center for Linguistic Empowerment, a program offering language training, career mentorship, and scholarship guidance for underrepresented youth. I watched a 15-year-old girl with braids and second-hand shoes step inside and pick up a Spanish workbook. And I knew. This was the real victory. Not the titles. Not the stages. Not even the garden rooftop where Grayson first saw me as more than a shadow. It was here, in the small, quiet places where power had once ignored people like me, where now doors were being opened without anyone needing to knock. That night, as we walked through the Bronx on our way back from the ceremony, Grayson took my hand in silence. We passed Darlene's Walk. There were flowers planted along the benches now. A plaque with her name. And a quote etched into the stone. You weren't born to clean the dreams of others. You were born to build your own. We stopped to read it again. Grayson looked at me. She'd be proud of you. I nodded. She'd be proud of us. And he smiled, not the billionaire smile, not the public one. The real one. The one that only came when the masks were off, when the armor was dropped. And beneath the soft street lamp glow, beneath the ghosts of everything we had endured and everything we had dared to become, we just stood there. Hand in hand. No longer who we were. But everything we had dared to become. Jasmine Brooks was once just a name on a housekeeping schedule, another invisible worker in a marble empire. But one choice, one voice, changed everything. She didn't just rise. She rewrote the system that tried to bury her. As she once said, if systems are built by people, then people can change them. What about you? If your moment comes, unexpected, inconvenient, even terrifying, will you step forward? Or let the world continue believing people like you don't belong in the room? If this story moved you, inspired you, or reminded you of your own fight to be seen, subscribe to True Echo, where we share the stories of the underestimated, the overlooked, and the unstoppable. Drop a comment below. Share your journey. Because someone else may need to hear it.